My friend, there are moments in life when we stand at the edge of something greater than we can understand. We may not see it yet. We may not feel it yet. But deep in our spirit, there is a stirring, a whisper, a divine nudge telling us, get ready, something is about to change. Maybe you've been waiting, praying, believing, and yet nothing seems to be happening. Maybe you felt stuck, wondering if your breakthrough will ever come. But let me tell you, today, this is your sign. The doors that seemed locked are about to open. The mountains that looked impossible are about to move. The burdens that have weighed you down are about to be lifted. You see, when we walk by faith, we are trusting in a power greater than ourselves. We serve a God who never fails, who never forgets, who never leaves his people without hope. And just because you don't see the answer yet doesn't mean he isn't working behind the scenes. He is aligning the right people, setting up divine appointments, preparing the way for something beyond your wildest imagination. But here's the key. You must be ready. You must walk in expectation. So often we pray for miracles, but live as if nothing is going to change. We ask for open doors, but hesitate when opportunity knocks. My friend, this is not the time to shrink back. This is the time to step forward. Think about those who came before us. The Israelites stood before the Red Sea, their enemies closing in behind them. It looked like the end, but it was actually the beginning of a miracle. The waters parted and they walked through on dry ground. The same God who did it then is the same God who is working in your life today. So don't let fear keep you in a place you were never meant to stay. Don't let doubt rob you of the promise that is just ahead. You've come too far to turn back now. Lift your eyes, strengthen your faith, hold on to his word, because when God moves, nothing can stop him. This is your sign. Get ready. The breakthrough is closer than you think. There are times in life when we feel like nothing is happening. We pray, we wait, we hope, but the situation stays the same. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and maybe even years. And in those moments, doubt creeps in. We begin to wonder, is God even listening? Does he see what I'm going through? But the truth is, just because we don't see the answer yet, doesn't mean God isn't working behind the scenes. Imagine a seed buried in the soil. To the human eye, it looks like nothing is happening. There's no movement, no visible sign of life, but beneath the surface, something incredible is taking place. The roots are stretching down. The process of growth has begun, and at the right time, that seed will push through the ground, revealing the life that was developing all along. That's how God works. While we're waiting, while we're wondering, he's preparing. While we're questioning, he's aligning everything for his perfect timing. One of the greatest challenges we face is trusting God when we can't see the outcome. Our human nature wants immediate answers, instant solutions, and quick results. But God's ways are higher than our ways. His timing is perfect, and his plans are greater than anything we could imagine. When we don't see anything happening, it doesn't mean he has forgotten us. It means he is working in a way that is beyond our understanding. Think about Joseph in the Bible. He had a dream of greatness, but his journey to that promise was filled with challenges. He was betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned. If you looked at his life in those moments, it would seem like nothing was going according to plan. But what Joseph didn't realize at the time was that God was working behind the scenes. Every setback was actually a setup. Every disappointment was leading him to his destiny. When the time was right, Joseph was promoted to the highest position in Egypt, and his dream became a reality. What looked like years of suffering were actually years of preparation. And that's exactly how God works in our lives. He is orchestrating things we can't see. He is moving in ways we don't yet understand. He is preparing the right people, opening the right doors, closing the wrong ones, and setting things in motion for His perfect plan. What may seem like a delay is not a denial, it's divine positioning. So often we get frustrated because we want to see immediate results. But faith is about trusting God even when there's no evidence of change. It's about believing that He's working even when everything around us looks the same. It's about knowing that just because we don't see movement doesn't mean there isn't progress. God's timing is not our timing, and His ways are not our ways. But one thing is certain: when He moves, everything changes. Sometimes God is working in the hearts of people we don't even know. He is positioning individuals who will be instrumental in our journey. He is preparing opportunities that haven't been revealed yet. He is shaping us, molding us, and refining us so that when the time comes, we are ready to step into what He has prepared. Think about a puzzle. When you dump the pieces out of the box, it looks like chaos. Nothing makes sense. But as you begin to put the pieces together, you start to see the picture come to life. That's how God works. Right now, it might feel like your life is a collection of random events, challenges, and unanswered questions, but behind the scenes, God is fitting every piece together perfectly, and when the time is right, you will step back and see how it all worked for your good. If you're in a season of waiting, don't lose heart. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. God is working, moving, and preparing something greater than you can imagine. Keep trusting, keep believing, and know that He is always faithful. Expectation is a powerful force in our lives. It shapes how we think, how we act, and how we prepare for what is to come. Too often people pray for breakthroughs, miracles, and opportunities, yet they continue to live as if nothing will change. They speak words of faith but carry an attitude of doubt. They ask God to open doors but remain hesitant to walk through them. The reality is that when we truly believe God is moving, our actions must align with our faith. There is a difference between wishful thinking and true expectation. Wishful thinking says, I hope something good happens. Expectation says, I know something good is coming and I am preparing for it. That's the kind of faith that moves mountains. When we live in expectation, we position ourselves to receive what God has already set in motion. We step out, we prepare, we make room for His blessings before they even arrive. Think about Noah. God told him to build an ark because a flood was coming. At the time, there was no sign of rain, no evidence of a storm, yet Noah acted on what God had spoken. He built the ark before the first drop of water ever fell. That is expectation in action. If Noah had waited until the storm clouds appeared, it would have been too late. His obedience before the rain came was the key to his survival. The same principle applies to us. If we wait to see proof before we prepare, we may miss what God has in store. Living with expectation means stepping into each day with the mindset that God is already at work. It means waking up not wondering if things will change, but believing that change is already in motion. It means speaking life over our situations, declaring God's promises, and refusing to let doubt take root in our hearts. Faith-filled expectation is not just about hoping. It's about knowing. It's about trusting that what God has spoken will come to pass. There was a woman in the Bible who had been sick for 12 years. She had spent all she had searching for a cure, yet nothing changed. But then she heard about Jesus. Something inside her stirred. She didn't just wish to be healed, she expected it. She told herself, if I can just touch the hem of His garment, I will be made well. That expectation drove her to push through the crowd, to press forward despite the obstacles. And when she finally touched Jesus' robe, her healing came instantly. It wasn't her need that made her well, it was her faith-filled expectation. Too often, people allow their circumstances to shape their faith rather than allowing their faith to shape their circumstances. They see obstacles and assume nothing will change. They experience delays and begin to doubt. But when we live in expectation, we stop looking at life through the lens of our limitations and start seeing it through the lens of God's power. Expectation requires action. If you are believing for something, ask yourself, are you preparing for it? If you are praying for a job, are you updating your resume and applying for positions? If you are believing for healing, are you speaking life and standing on God's promises? If you are trusting for a breakthrough, are you positioning yourself to receive it? Expectation isn't passive, it's active. It requires us to move forward in faith before we see the result. A farmer doesn't wait for rain before he plants his seeds. He prepares the soil, sows the seed, and trusts that the rain will come. He doesn't stand in an empty field hoping for a harvest without taking action. The same is true for us. If we are expecting God to move, we must prepare the ground. We must act as if the answer is already on the way, because in the spiritual realm it is. When we live with true expectation, we stop reacting to circumstances and start responding in faith. We wake up each day knowing that God is working, even if we don't see it yet. We move forward with confidence, knowing that the breakthrough is already on its way. We align our thoughts, our words, and our actions with the truth that God is faithful, and when we do that, we put ourselves in the perfect position to receive everything He has promised. There is something powerful about remembering what God has done in the past. Too often when we face difficulties, we focus so much on the problem in front of us that we forget the miracles behind us. But when we look back and see how God has moved before, it builds our faith to trust that He will do it again. The same God who parted the Red Sea is the same God working in your life today. The same God who brought down the walls of Jericho is the same God who is tearing down the obstacles in your path. When the Israelites stood before the Red Sea, they saw an impossible situation. Behind them, the Egyptian army was closing in, and before them was an uncrossable sea. Fear overtook them, and they cried out in despair. But what they didn't realize was that the God who had brought them out of Egypt was not about to leave them stranded. In that moment, God told Moses to stretch out his staff, and as he obeyed, the waters parted. What had once been a barrier became a pathway. What had once been a source of fear became a testimony of God's power. And when the Israelites walked across on dry ground, they saw with their own eyes that nothing is impossible for God. That same power is available today. The same God who made a way for them is making a way for you. You may not see how, you may not understand when, but He has not changed. His faithfulness is not limited to one generation or one moment in time. The same God who delivered in the past will deliver again. The same God who provided before will provide again. And when you trust in Him, you will see His hand at work in ways beyond your imagination. Think about David standing before Goliath. To everyone else, the giant looked unbeatable, but David did something different. He remembered. He remembered how God had helped him defeat the lion and the bear when he was tending his sheep. He remembered that God had given him strength before, and he had no doubt that God would do it again. So while others trembled in fear, David stepped forward in faith. And with one stone he brought down the giant, not because of his own ability, but because of the God who had proven Himself faithful before. When you are facing a challenge, look back and remember. Think about the times when you didn't know how things would work out, but God made a way. Remember the moments when you felt lost, but He guided you. Reflect on the times when you were weak, but He gave you strength. Those testimonies are not just memories. They are fuel for your faith. They are reminders that if God did it once, He will do it again. One of the greatest dangers in our walk of faith is forgetting what God has already done. The enemy wants you to focus on what you don't have, what you can't see, and what isn't happening. He wants you to be so overwhelmed by the present problem that you forget the past victories. But when you choose to remember, your faith grows. When you declare God has done it before and I know He will do it again, you shift your focus from fear to God told Joshua to take 12 stones from the Jordan River and set them up as a memorial so that future generations would remember what He had done. Why? Because we are quick to forget. We get caught up in the struggles of today and lose sight of how God has provided in the past. But if we take time to remember, we will find strength to believe again. Your past victories are proof of God's faithfulness. Every answered prayer, every breakthrough, every moment of divine intervention is a reminder that He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. If He healed before, He can heal again. If He restored before, He can restore again. Whatever you are facing right now, don't let fear convince you that it's impossible. Look back at what God has already done and let that be the foundation of your faith. The same God who moved then is moving now, and He will not fail you. Fear and doubt have a way of creeping in just when we are on the verge of breakthrough. They whisper lies, telling us that we are not ready, that we are not strong enough, that we will fail if we step forward. But the truth is, when God opens a door, nothing should hold us back. When He calls us forward, hesitation is not an option. Every great move of God requires a step of faith, and that step often comes in the face of fear. Think about Peter when he saw Jesus walking on the water. The waves were crashing, the wind was strong, and every part of Peter's human reasoning told him it was impossible to walk on water. But when Jesus called him out of the boat, Peter didn't wait for the storm to stop. He didn't wait for perfect conditions. He stepped out, and for a moment he walked on the water. The impossible became possible because he chose faith over fear. But the moment he allowed doubt to take over, he began to sink. His circumstances didn't change, his focus did. Instead of keeping his eyes on Jesus, he focused on the storm, and that's what caused him to go under. That's exactly what happens in our lives. We pray for opportunities, for doors to open, for God to make a way, but when the moment comes to step forward, fear tries to stop us. We start looking at the obstacles instead of looking at God. We focus on what could go wrong instead of trusting the one who called us. But faith is not about having all the answers. Faith is about taking the step even when we don't know how everything will work out. Fear will always try to keep us in a place we were never meant to stay. It will tell us that we are not qualified, that we are not good enough, that we will never succeed. It will remind us of past failures and try to convince us that history will repeat itself. But God does not call us based on our qualifications. He calls us based on His power. When He opens a door, He gives us everything we need to walk through it. Our job is not to figure everything out. Our job is to trust Him and take the step. The enemy knows that if he can keep us afraid, he can keep us from our destiny. He knows that hesitation can lead to missed opportunities. He knows that doubt can rob us of the blessings God has prepared. That's why he works so hard to fill our minds with fear. But when we recognize his tactics, we can reject them. When we remind ourselves that God has not given us a spirit of fear, we can move forward with confidence. One of the most powerful examples of stepping forward in faith is found in the story of the Israelites at the Jordan River. After wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, they finally reached the edge of the promised land. But before they could enter, they had to cross the river. Unlike the Red Sea, where God parted the waters before they stepped in, this time the priests had to step into the water first. It was only when their feet touched the river that the water stopped flowing and the path was made clear. God was teaching them something important. Faith requires action. They could have stood on the shore waiting for the water to move, but if they had done that, they would have never crossed. Instead, they obeyed, stepped forward, and God made a way. Many times we stand at the edge of something great, but we are afraid to take the first step. We want God to show us the entire plan before we move. We want Him to part the waters first, but often He is waiting for us to step in. The miracle happens when we move. The breakthrough comes when we trust Him enough to take action. The difference between those who see God's promises fulfilled and those who don't is often a single step. One person allows fear to hold them back, while another chooses faith and moves forward. The door is open, the opportunity is there, but only those who walk through it will experience what God has prepared. If fear has been holding you back, it's time to let it go. If doubt has been whispering in your ear, it's time to silence it with faith. God has opened the door for you. The opportunity is in front of you. And while fear may try to stop you, it has no power unless you give in to it. The same God who called you is the same God who will sustain you. The same God who led you this far will not leave you now. Take this step, move forward, walk into what God has prepared. There comes a moment when everything shifts, a moment when prayers that once seemed unheard are answered, when doors that were shut suddenly swing open, when battles that felt unending come to a victorious conclusion. That moment is closer than you think. The breakthrough is not some distant hope. It is near, and God is already moving. Even if you can't see it yet, even if everything still looks the same, trust that things are already changing in the unseen. In life, we often get discouraged because we don't see immediate results. We plant seeds in faith, but when we don't see growth right away, we start questioning if anything is happening. But just like a seed buried in the ground, transformation is taking place beneath the surface. The roots are growing, the process is unfolding, and at the right time, breakthrough will come. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean God isn't working. Just because you feel stuck doesn't mean movement isn't happening. There is a reason why so many miracles in the Bible happen suddenly. The woman with the issue of blood suffered for 12 years, but in a single moment she was healed. The man at the pool of Bethesda waited 38 years for his healing, and in one encounter with Jesus, everything changed. Paul and Silas were locked in a prison cell, but after they prayed and worshiped, an earthquake came, the prison doors flung open, and their chains fell off. The breakthrough was closer than they realized, and it came at exactly the right moment. That is how God moves. He is never late, never early, but always right on time. You may have been waiting for years, you may have faced setback after setback, but that doesn't mean your breakthrough isn't near. It only means that God is preparing the perfect timing for you to receive it. So often, right before the breakthrough comes, the enemy tries to convince you that nothing is happening. He wants you to give up when you are on the edge of your miracle. He wants you to walk away when the answer is right around the corner. But the truth is, the moment you feel the most discouraged, the moment you feel the most tempted to quit, is often the moment just before everything changes. Look at the story of Joshua and the Battle of Jericho. God told the Israelites to march around the city for 6 days without saying a word. On the seventh day, they were to march around it 7 times, and then they were to shout. Can you imagine how they must have felt on those first 6 days? Nothing happened. The walls didn't shake. The city remained just as fortified as before. If they had judged their progress based on what they saw, they might have given up. But what they didn't realize was that each step, each lap around the city was bringing them closer to breakthrough. And on the 7th day, after they obeyed, after they endured, after they refused to give up, the walls came crashing down. Your breakthrough is coming in the same way. You may feel like you've been marching in circles, seeing no results, but every prayer, every step of faith, every act of obedience is bringing you closer to the moment when everything shifts. The walls that seemed unmovable will fall. The chains that seemed unbreakable will snap. The prayers that seemed unanswered will be fulfilled. God is not a God of delays. He is a God of divine timing. What He started in you, He will complete. What He promised, He will bring to pass. He does not place dreams in your heart only to leave them unfulfilled. He does not bring you to the edge of a breakthrough only to let you fall. If He said it, He will do it. If He opened the door, no one can shut it. This is the time to hold on. This is the time to keep believing. Don't let discouragement talk you out of your promise. Don't let doubt steal what God is about to do. The breakthrough is not far away. It is closer than you think. The moment you have been praying for, the change you have been waiting for, the miracle you have been believing for is already in motion. Stay strong, keep trusting, and get ready because God is about to move. You are standing on the edge of something extraordinary. Everything you have prayed for, everything you have believed for, everything you have waited for is closer than you think. This is not the time to shrink back in fear, to second guess, or to let doubt steal what God has already set in motion. This is the time to step forward in faith, to expect the miraculous, and to trust that He who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. God is moving even when you don't see it. He is working even when you don't feel it. The doors He is opening, the battles He is fighting, the miracles He is preparing, none of it is by accident. He has brought you to this moment for a reason. So stand firm, keep pressing forward, keep declaring His promises, keep walking in expectation. The waiting season is not wasted, the delays are not denials, and the obstacles are not permanent. The breakthrough is coming, the victory is near, and the move of God is already in motion. This is your sign God is about to move.